Hey, my name is Mario, and I'm here to talk to you about the critical nature of data in campaigns. I run campaigns for a living, and I've done them all over the country, and I've, as a result, driven to all of the contiguous United States as well as the District of Columbia. So in the movies and television, when they talk about campaigns, it's press conferences and rallies, and as a campaign manager, I'll tell you that it's spreadsheets and phone calls. Hi, I need everything and you don't want to give me anything. Can I have at least a little bit? Thanks. Campaigns live and die based on how good the data in their area is. How good your data is depends heavily on how good your state party is at collecting it. The biggest challenge states have is making sure that their voter rolls are accurate. Each state maintains their own list via their Secretary of State. If a state has bad data practices, there's a negative downstream effect. In states like Iowa and New Hampshire, where the presidential campaigns come through and spend a great deal of money every 4 years, the data is incredible. They have identified things like teachers and firefighters. In states where we don't have as much investment in our campaigns, where we don't frequently have competitive campaigns, the data is generally very poor. We need to invest more everywhere in our data. A recent congressional campaign I worked had roughly 60% of the phone numbers were bad. Trying to run a campaign like that is very ineffective. In states where we have frequent competitive elections, the data improves itself through our organizing efforts. For Democratic candidates, most commonly they get access to the voter file through Vote Builder, which is NGP Van's voter file contracted through the DNC. In theory, the DNC is enhancing that data with additional information, trying to improve the quality and matching it to some data that they bring in from other vendors. That should help us target the right voters and give us the information and capacity to organize to win our elections. In a variety of efforts with data, you'll talk about a match rate, where you're trying to line up a set of names or phone numbers with targets to get to vote for you, to get to donate for you. We talk about that match rate. When you import a list from the voter file into something like Facebook, if you can get a 60% match rate, generally you're pretty excited. When you start talking about what you want to give to your organizers during GOTV, you want a much higher match rate. If your volunteers are calling no answers all day, you're not getting people out to vote. There's a few things in the data the state parties sell you. In the DNC enhancement of the voter file, they use the National Change of Address database to try and track people that are moving, people that are relocating and changing their registrations. What we're trying to make sure we do is eliminate the people that are registered in multiple states and get them where they actually live today to participate in the right election. Part of the agreement that allows us to get Vote Builder access at a lower cost is the sharing of that data. This is what helps us get better data for the general election and future elections as we keep working and progressing. We want every campaign to contribute to improving the data so that we can continue to win and advance our values. Depending on which vendor and product you're working with, the agreement under who owns the data can change. In many cases, you're agreeing to share that data forward with future campaigns in exchange for lowering the cost of using the product. But if there are specific data, such as the candidate's personal donor circle, you want to protect that. You want to make sure that's in the agreement up front. We talk a lot about Van or Vote Builder because it's one of the most common field organizing tool sets that gets used. But there are other similar platforms such as PDI, which is a very robust platform that I've used side by side with Vote Builder to do targeting. While I preferred the Van for the field effort, the PDI targeting system is much better. And so trying to use those things together produces a great result. On bigger campaigns, you'll use multiple tools doing similar things to get the best results. On smaller campaigns, you use what you can afford and what gets the job done. The voter file type program that you use, whether it's Van or PDI, they typically have price structures that vary depending on the quality of the data and the quantity of data you require. If you're running statewide in Florida, you should expect to pay a lot more for your voter file access than if you're running for a municipal race in a small county in rural Georgia. The price structures generally for a congressional race vary from anywhere around $3,000 up to $15,000 for most states. In the states where the data is the best, the prices can go up significantly from there. If you want to run for president, you need $100,000 or more to get access to Vote Builder in Iowa. In most states, if you're running as a declared Democrat in a partisan race, you can get access to Vote Builder. There's typically a fee involved, but at the lower levels, sometimes that access is provided at no cost by the town or county party. That should be your first point of contact when you're considering running. Talking to the county party leader, the town party leader, and finding out those answers. Ask them as many questions as you can think of, and as the conversation goes, ask more questions. If you don't ask questions, you don't get answers. What do I do if I'm in an area with bad data? Well, you have a whole bunch of different issues, but the first and most important thing is to discover that early. If you figure out you have bad data 5 days before the election, there is nothing you can do. If you know that you have bad data, and in a specific area, such as phone numbers, you can work with vendors that specifically do phone number matching, and they can try and take your voter file and identify you the right phone numbers for your targeted audience. You want to do your best to limit what you're matching to the people you need so that you can lower the cost. You should expect to pay anywhere from 1 to 5 cents a match for a phone number. Emails generally in the much more expensive range, 25 cents to up to $3 a match. In the early stages of your campaign, you should do everything you can to test your data. And that might be as simple as handing an organizer a list of phone numbers and asking them just to try and confirm that the people are who the list says they are. And if they come back to you and say out of these 100 people, only 12 were the right person, you definitely have a problem. If they come back to you and say, listen, I talked to 30% of the list and most of the people I talked to matched the identity on the list, then you're in good shape. You got to try and find that out early and then work on solutions from there afterwards. In places like Iowa, where the caucus goes through and improves the data cycle after cycle, you can see match rates in precincts up to 80-90%. The biggest struggle is the people who have either passed on or the people that have moved, and you typically see those in the same age groups. So you see, older folks that pass on and are no longer there for you to call, and you see young kids, 20s and 30-year-olds is where you see a lot more movement. The most organic way to improve your data is through active field programs. If you're out knocking doors in the neighborhoods, if you're making calls again and again, day after day, starting early in your campaign, you will produce the quality data you need to win the election in November. At the very start of your campaign, the process of collecting all the information is incredibly tedious, and the candidate themselves might find it horribly intrusive. But you start with some very basic things. You start with their yearbooks from high school and college. You start with the employee directories everywhere they've worked. You start with talking to every member of their family, their friends, their coworkers, their best bud, and asking them for every name and every phone number of who they know. If you really want to be prepared in advance and you're thinking about running, make sure that every name in your phone's contacts is spelled correctly, has the first and last name, and any other information about them that's relevant. Identify cell phone numbers correctly, identify work lines correctly, fax lines correctly, and when your campaign staff comes in, they can just export that straight out of your phone and start turning it into fundraising lists. Understanding the data you have matters. Hard data is verifiable facts that can be confirmed from other sources. This might include their full name of a voter, their phone number, their date of birth, and their address. Soft data would be scores, analytics, or other projections about what that voter might do for you or might contribute to your campaign. One thing that both parties are trying to do is facilitate a better exchange of data between the candidate campaigns and the outside groups such as PACs and interest groups, advocacy organizations, and unions that are all working side by side but not in coordination with each other.